Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another headlines docket mishmash show that we do here. It's Friday. Hope everybody had an amazing week. I know some people's weeks don't end on Fridays, which means you're kind of still going, but keep on pushing, keep on trucking. For those of you enjoying the Friday, hopefully it's coming to a nice conclusion. You've got some nice plans for the week. And before we get there, though, we've got to talk about what's going on in the world around us. And you can see over here from Rantingly, we've got a story on the Hunter Joe Biden saga. And I haven't taken a deep dive into this, but I think we probably will for a video. So I want to just spend a quick minute on it, not too much time. But over at Breitbart, they're telling us that David Weiss, a Trump-appointed prosecutor, is considering an indictment for Hunter Biden, which would be very interesting. Of course, we've been spending a lot of time on the Hunter Biden saga, been following it, really since the election, since Joe Biden was running for office, and largely it's been ignored. But now a lot of people are starting to talk about it. Very curious. Joe Biden's polling numbers are in the toilet. Wonder if that has anything to do with it. The midterms are coming up. If Joe Biden and the Democrats just get massacred, which they probably will, then you start to ask yourselves, are the Democrats thinking of a changing of the guard? And are some of these stories persuasion in order to start that narrative? There's a book by Robert Cialdini. He's sort of the psychiatrist persuasion guru, and he has a whole book called Persuasion. And so when I think about politics a lot of the time, I'll think about it as sort of a beginning, middle, and end. Oftentimes the news, the stuff that we're talking about in the news, we think it's kind of in the middle, but a lot of these things are sort of, 6 month, 12 months narratives and campaigns, and we can get lost in that because we're so focused on like what happened today. But really, some of these stories might be building up because they've got a bigger end goal in mind. And a lot of this sort of feels like that. Like they know that this is going to be bad and they need a plan B, sort of an exit opportunity if things don't go well. So on Breitbart, they have some more. They say David's a professional prosecutor. CBS News apparently is the people who are reporting on this. And Catherine Herridge is typically doing amazing work over there at CBS. This article is not from her. This is from Pat Hamilton. He's saying he's a straight shooter. This is a picture of David Weiss. He's a moderate Republican, not a Trumper. Trump appointed Weiss to be the Delaware attorney. Biden decided to keep him in office. He's diligent, gray-haired, quiet leadership. So this is the guy who's sort of making the decision about whether to decide to charge Hunter Biden. So considering a federal grand jury indictment at the moment, deciding whether there's enough evidence there. Of course there is. But we'll see if anything comes around here. Now, I remember there were some details or some conversation about Joe Biden wanting to get rid of this guy at the outset. They didn't do that because that could be problematic, to go in there and fire somebody who's investigating your son. So they're not going to do that. We'll see. There's not much meat here. I was thinking maybe there would be a statement about some decision, but not too much there. So this looks like it's kind of a roundup article. April 1st, we have NBC News.
A 2013
And there were, let me switch this audio here.
trip to China getting new attention this morning, not for what Joe Biden did, but for who he brought with him. His son, Hunter, joining the then vice president on the official visit to Beijing, along with Hunter's daughter, Finnegan.
Yeah, we covered that at length. And there were all sorts of records. He was there with Secret Service, flying around, sort of on official trips, meeting up with Joe Biden. We talked about that video. I did a whole video on the Chinese trip because he went over there. It was all for personal relations. And then he came back and his company got like this new, approval, this new contract. Oh, yeah, you can do business here. Here's the stamp from the Chinese government. You're going, well, that's very convenient. I thought you were over there to just kind of go see the Great Wall and take selfies for your OnlyFans account there, Hunter. But he apparently, was interested in making more money for his daddy. So you can see interesting article over on Breitbart. Let's see what else we've got from Breitbart. Always a good place to see what's going on. We've got some Russian news. We've got first major warship downed, according to Breitbart. And I've seen that headline. And this is interesting because apparently there's a conversation happening this was a big Russian ship that apparently was attacked by Ukrainian forces, even though my understanding is they don't really have a navy since they're more or less, well, no, they've got some water, right, sort of on the southern border there. But I don't know if they have a full Navy, and it's kind of a surprise that you could see Ukraine taking out a giant Russian battleship, or I think it's actually a missile cruiser. But then there was something. I leave my doors open in the mornings. It's beautiful out. So I get some bugs who come in here and they have to be eliminated from time to time, as you just saw happen. So what needs to happen here, or the conversation happening here, is that the Russians had a major ship taken out. Did the Ukrainians do it? They say they did. Of course, they're very happy about their success. The Russians say, no, it was a fire. Some of our ammunition went off and sort of exploded in the ship. And so, we're just going to tow this thing back to shore. On the way back, the Russians said that there was some bumpy water, or some, stormy water, and the actual ship sunk down to the bottom of the ocean. Now, people are saying, well, is that because the Ukrainians did so much damage to the ship that they caused it to sink? Well, we don't really know. Or is it because there was so much damage that the Russians sunk it so they didn't have to bring this sort of, sorry state of a ship back into the shores where everybody would see the pictures and everybody would say, that's not a fire. You got attacked by something. And then they would sort of have, egg on their face. So very interesting questions. Don't know too much about it. Let's see here. ISW says the Russian cruiser Moskva, a flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, sunk after a likely anti-ship attack. So let's take a look at some of these photos here. We can see the Russian missile cruiser, significant fighting in the past 24 hours. Doesn't say too much about the actual ship itself. Here's where it looks like. Assessed control of the terrain around Kherson. All right, so not too much there. Now, we've been sort of lightly talking incidentally about some of the Russian stuff, just largely because it's hard to gain what I think is clarity on the situation. A lot of it's secondhand reporting. The Russians say X, Y, and Z happened. Ukrainians say X, Y, and Z happened. Our own people in the media are obviously sycophants for one side in this, and so it's just hard to trust any of the data that comes out, and so we just kind of leave it alone. Here, though, we've got some other good stories. You can see Democrat donor Ed Buck sentenced to 30 years, another Breitbart article. Now, Ed Buck, this is a very troubled individual, certainly, donated over $500,000 to Democratic Party causes. He actually stems from Arizona, Ed Buck. I think he made a bunch of money here and then ran, some campaigns against some governors, I think before I was even born, or just a baby boy. But here we see some details. Between 2017 and 2019, two black men, Gemel Moore and Timothy Dean, mysteriously died in Ed Buck's apartment. Oh, that is mystery. Later, it was revealed that he had a fetish. He liked to lure young black men, many of whom were experiencing homelessness, to his residence, where he would inject them with methamphetamine and drug them with sedatives, sometimes without their consent. Jury found him guilty last year after deliberating for 4 hours, convicted them 2 counts of distribution resulting in death. In the sentencing memo, prosecutors recommending life, saying he had an insatiable appetite for injecting people. Buck solicited his victims in various ways: social media, dating, escort, victim referrals, hired people, offering a finder's fees for referrals. So the guy had a whole scheme. During the trial, Buck lawyers, one of whom helped prosecute OJ, claimed the victims were addicts and they were not killed by Buck. Well, the jury didn't buy it. Sounds like he's got sort of a lot of evidence going there against him.
Former Democratic
from ABC News. Let's see here.
Former Democratic donor Ed Buck.
So we got, no clips. Buck was found guilty last year of supplying. All right, so we've got all that. You can see a photograph from within the court, 30 years. Pretty serious, yeah, and serious sentence to accommodate. A couple other links here. It looks like Biden was shaking hands with the heir, which is not a surprise. This is over from the New York Post. Let's see if this will load and we can see what Joe Biden's doing. So here's this. Oh my gosh, he is so confused. Somebody help him! Over here! Over here, President.
God bless you all.
Oh my God. Yeah, look, I understand not knowing where to go after the stage and making a faux pas, trying to open a door that doesn't open. But that was like a good 4 seconds. What should I do? Oh, hello, sir. There's nobody there, Mr. President. We got to go to back to Delaware. It's Friday. Speaking of Delaware and Friday, we don't really have a schedule for Joe Biden here yet. I saw this over from FactBase, which is where we check the calendar, and they apparently didn't publish anything. So you can see it's about 10:13 Eastern time where the president is. So he's in Maryland, and we got no Friday schedule. So that's great. So I don't know what he's doing today. I'm not sure anybody else does. I think this gets published, officially from the White House. They get this data. So it's 10 o'clock where he's at, and he's not given us the schedule yet. So who knows what he's doing. I can pretty much guarantee that when it comes out, it's going to look something like it was last Friday, which is something like this. Daily brief. Last Friday. Oh, what? So last Saturday is when they left to Delaware. They go to Delaware basically every weekend. So they left on Saturday last week. The week before that, did they leave on Friday? Yeah. So they left on Friday on the 1st back in Newcastle, Delaware. So probably going to Delaware again this weekend, I would guess, where he's going to get injected with whatever to keep him semi-cognizant for the next 48 hours or so. But that is the president, not much there. Let's see what Drudge has for us. Drudge is, I know it's compromised for sure. And I know that this is kind of an interesting, it's an interesting mishmash because every now and then they'll serve up some good kind of right stuff. And then they'll sort of layer on some like left stuff. It's a weird dynamic what's happened with Drudge, but I do check it from time to time because it's got a little bit more mainstream and it's still a nice aggregator of a lot of the news. Here, I was surprised to see that they've got a little story on Shanghai and what's going on over there because this has largely been kind of ignored, I think, by a lot of the people in the mainstream media. Nobody wants to rattle the Chinese, or I should say the Chinese government more specifically, the CCP. The Chinese people seem like they're quite rattled based on what their own government is doing to them, and it has been horrendous. We haven't talked about it much here because it's kind of a no-go zone on YouTube to talk a lot about the vid stuff, and we got a little bit in trouble as a result of that. So I kind of have to tiptoe around it, which I think is what they want. Sort of this you don't talk about the things that we don't want you to talk about, otherwise you get in trouble, and it works, unfortunately. And so here we can see the Daily Mail's reporting that the residents are pinned to the ground. You can see some of this horrible stuff that's going on in there. Yeah, I think that's probably going to really solve the virus. Kicking that person in the skull should help eliminate the viral particles. If you kick somebody in the head, what I think the theory is, you're going to dislodge the viral particles from their mucous membranes. As they're bleeding out of their skull, they're excreting the virus particles. So maybe that's the strategy. I'm not real sure, but it's totally horrendous. You can see this person is being dragged across the street. You see the Chinese people bowing and sort of cowering to their overlords because they have been conditioned to do so. All right, absolutely horrendous stuff. And we have Xi Jinping. He's visiting the South China Sea. We've got a lot of interesting things happening near Taiwan. The Chinese are doing war drills sort of over the airspace of Taiwan. We have a bunch of U.S. diplomats or politicians went over there to show solidarity with the Chinese, with the Taiwanese. And you can see it's just sort of madness over there. Very interesting thing I saw happen on Twitter. It's called the Great Translation Movement. And you can see that they just joined on Twitter on March 2022. They're already up to 121,000 followers. Very interesting account to follow. I want to show you what they're doing. They're basically translating things that are happening in China. And of course, as you know, there is the Great Firewall of China. I actually spent about 2 weeks in China. I traveled to Shanghai and Beijing, saw the Great Wall, saw the Forbidden City, met a lot of people in China, spent a lot of time traveling around, visiting schools, and it was an amazing experience. Now, when I was there, it was a difficult internet to use because I couldn't use any of my American internet websites unless you log in through a VPN. And even then it was all wonky and slow. So I basically just didn't check anything. Now I was there several years ago, but I didn't, check my Gmail or any of my social media accounts because most of it just didn't work. You try to go there on Gmail and just time out, right? Just loading. Very weird. And so where you stayed, you had to kind of VPN in, but those were wonky and it was just really slow. It was a really interesting experience. You couldn't kind of see anything outside. Now here you can see that all of that is still continuing on, probably to a greater degree now as a result of some of the new systems that the Chinese government has enrolled and some of the new, changing world that we're experiencing, COVID. And I think that there's been sort of an increase in tension between the Chinese government and the United States and largely the rest of the world. And so the point here is that a lot of what's happening in China is left in China. It stays in China. It's like Las Vegas or something. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. It's kind of the same concept. And so it's hard to see what's really happening. But this account is doing that. They're taking different posts from Chinese social media before they get, banned or eliminated or whatever, and translating them and then just sharing them with the world. And some of what's coming out is quite amazing. Here, this post came out 39 minutes ago from this morning, says, the Chinese government has been very creative to ensure total control in the name of pandemic. Now people in Changchun cannot leave their bicycles without government approval. So let's take a look here. This one here says, this is a pandemic seal sticker authorized by the city. This will ensure the driver cannot leave the bicycle without authorities' approval. So this guy's got his official government ID and he can ride his bicycle. So that's what's happening in China. Now, some of this other stuff, let's see, this one's got some good posts. This one came out. CCP continues to broadcast the U.S. is bad. So people are starving. They say, yeah, the U.S. does this every year, sort of impacting human rights. Here's another one. Daily Mail. Since when has the Daily Mail become a reliable source, they say? Good question. Here, they say, since it's conspiracy, we'll leave that one alone. But here, they posted this. Yeah, talking about some COVID stuff. Here, welcome to the censored Republic of China. Thanks to the CCP, you can either speak freely. So somebody types in here, call me by your name with hashtags, and then you get this warning in Mandarin that says, according to relevant laws, regulations, and policies, this tag cannot be presented because it's been censored. The CCP has control of that. You can see some horrendous pictures coming out. Let's see. Here's another trending topic page on Weibo. And so Sina Weibo, see the irony? This is a big social media network there. And you can see here, what's trending? Oh, amazed by the fresh look of old revolutionary base areas. You think the Chinese people are really interested in that? Or how about this? The U.S. has the most severe human rights deficit in the world. What is that? 2,094,000, eyeballs on that one, I guess. How about number 2? Shanghai has dispelled multiple rumors related to the pandemic. Oh, that's interesting. A lot of people are interested in that in China. Oh yeah, I love this. Or retweet, repost. No, right? This is all being controlled by the government. Our scientists announced the latest research finding of lunar samples. So another, hey, we're amazing. We got stuff from the moon, but none of the actual reaction from the people who are very upset, who are oppressed, who are dying, who are throwing themselves out of buildings and off of rooftops because of their psychotic government. And I have every belief that if they could have done something like this here in the United States, they would have. And in fact, they did. I mean, they locked everybody down in their houses for multiple weeks, if not significantly longer than that. People were dying all over America. Suicides, drug overdoses. There are children who have been basically set back several years. You're seeing different departments now saying, oh no, a couple of years ago, they were supposed to have 300 words in their vocabularies, but 100's good for now. I mean, things change and the world's different. And they don't need all those words anyway. So everything has gotten worse, largely because the government stepped in and thought that they could solve a problem, and they can't. They're incompetent. And so the same thing's happening in China. They would have done this here if they could have. There's a whole, different slew of ideas as to why this might be. Shanghai's kind of a big city, kind of going a little bit liberal, a little bit westerny. When I was there was Starbucks. So when I was traveling around Shanghai, it was very interesting because you would go sort of from one block to another block, and you'd see kind of the old world and the new world, literally like across the street. It was very wild. And you'd see places where they have these open sort of markets where you could see, meats. And I think I played a video on YouTube some time ago, but meats and different cuts of animals and, vegetables and fish and all sorts of stuff. But then you go right across the street and there's a Starbucks and there's, all these sort of Western restaurants, and there's people there with all of their Western clothes on and all of their Western tech. And it's like two entirely different countries, almost like a street across from each other. It was a wild experience. But you can see, if you're the old world China and you want this communist regime and you hate the Western influence, you're going to want to make sure that you just kind of clamp down on that from time to time. And a good way to do that is to just say, oh, the pandemic's here and we're just going to take total control of the city. They may be doing that. We had another one here from them. I'd encourage you to go follow them. There's a lot that are interesting here because, like I said, they're taking social media posts and they are just translating them. I mean, that's all they're doing. They're not really adding anything to the original post. Obviously, some commentaries in the tweets, but you can see a lot here. Here's another one. Peak comedy indeed. Maybe the worst is yet to come. So somebody here posted this. Says, people are starving. Sohos are singing. State media are shaming women. What a wonderful 2022. And then, boom, blocked. No permission to read temporarily. All right, so it looks like that got blocked by the Chinese censors. Same thing here. Somebody else posted this. Today, Shanghai, 25 million people forced to do a PCR test. Help from everywhere. The nation is planned as a whole game of chess. This is Chinese power. See another video here. Evil government. Yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible. And oftentimes when I hear people like Ray Dalio and others saying that, the Chinese are going to come out and just sort of clean America's clock, I think there's probably some truth to that, largely because they have more will and they've got a little bit more fire in the belly than a lot of our American politicians do. And quite frankly, I think a lot of our American politicians are sort of owned largely by China, or at least some of the Chinese interests overlap with their interests. And so they won't ever open their mouths to speak out against the government. And when you have a situation like that, we start to see a changing dynamic in power. Ray Dalio and others are saying this is a changing world order. The dollar's being deflated and devalued. Inflated and devalued. The supply chains are basically wrecked. You see oil prices going through the roof. No real intention of drilling or solving that crisis here. Housing markets are going to be in shambles here soon enough if what some of these prognosticators are prognosticating comes true. And this becomes sort of a changing world order on that basis. Now, when you bring that back full circle and you see sort of some of the actions of the Chinese government and what they're doing to the people who are locked into their homes, throwing themselves out of buildings because they don't want to live in these horrendous prison conditions, I start to doubt their ability to maintain their edge. And I've said this before. Now, I think that the world is sort of bifurcating into two different areas. You have this top-down totalitarian control, social network. We monitor everything. Everything is digitized. The government controls everything. Do what we say. We give you permission. Ultra high regulation. Essentially what most of the Democratic Party wants here in the United States, I think. And many Republicans too, to be fair. That's one approach, and I think that's what the Chinese are doing. Now, when you have a situation like that, and when people's freedom is limited, and they can't even engage in any type of societal activity like what you're seeing in China, that's going to cause, in my opinion, massive flight out of the country. As soon as this thing's over, right? Anybody who has an entrepreneurial spirit, anybody with good ideas, people who want to sort of change the dynamic or come up with innovations, they're going to leave. They're just going to say, this is ridiculous. Enough of this. This is not a good environment. Now, they can't, necessarily leave the country or anything like that, but they will disengage from that development activity because the government is clamping down on their freedom to do it. They're not free to do it. How can you go and create new amazing things if you're locked in your apartment or your home under gun and key from the People's Liberation Army in China? Scary stuff. And so, now you say, all right, look, I've always been of the opinion that freedom will prevail and that, people want it. It's sort of in their genes. You're seeing what's happening with Elon and Twitter, and it's causing a big stir because people want to be able to be free. And I think it's necessary in order to have a functional society that progresses. Otherwise, you end up with what happens in China. And the people on top are A-okay with that, right? They think that many people who don't comply with them are unsophisticated and they're idiots and they're killing grandma and they're just too stupid to follow the science and all of this nonsense. And so they treat people like cattle. Stay in your home, put your mask on, do what we say. And that's not far off from what's happening in China. So when we look at this and we see people who are, ending their lives because of this oppression, I'm thinking, wow, gosh, it's a good thing that could never happen here. What are you talking about, Rob? It did happen here. We just lived through it. We're still living through it in some people's minds, in some people's own, mental prisons that they've allowed to be created around them by the media, by the Faucis, by everybody out there, who made this a ultra high priority at the expense of all of the other priorities. So, I don't know that it was all that far off. And if they can come out with Bill Gates's, ideas for, digital IDs and vaccine passports and all this stuff, well, how far off is that really from China? I don't think it is all that far. So that was a little bit of a interesting conversation on China. I think that I would encourage you to go follow here. I wasn't expecting to go that deep on this story, but it is irritating that, it's something that is so obviously evil and wrong here as an outside observer. What we're seeing the Chinese doing is awful. Why is that so problematic when we basically did that here in the United States? Well, I don't know, because it's a little bit more intense, I guess. They're actually wearing bodysuits and beating people. But we had all sorts of very problematic things, not quite the beating of people by government agents, but pretty close. And it was on the border there in some places. And we saw violence here over COVID. We've seen people arrested, thrown in prison. We've seen people fined and indicted over COVID. We've covered a whole slew of COVID crimes here. Totally ridiculous. So it's not all that far off from what's happening in China. So people to say, well, it's just all, things are better here because we have unlimited freedom or protections. I'm not so sure about that. Those got watered down relatively quickly. And if they could impose these same types of Chinese conditions here at home, I'm sure that they would. And I seriously mean that. So, all right, let's see what else we've got. So we talked about the Biden schedule. We saw over at the Epoch Times. Let's see what else we have here. Ed Buck, we saw him. Still some more Elon news. Trump says he's not going to tweet again, even if he gets back on Twitter. So he's just mad. He's just not using that garbage platform. RNC votes to withdraw from the Commission on Presidential Debates. So are they not going to be participating? RNC voted unanimously, not debating. Ronna McDaniel said the commission is biased, doesn't enact common sense reforms. GOP is going to find a newer, better debate platform. Well, GOP is urging them not to participate. All right, well, whatever. The Republicans, we'll see what they are able to come up with. I'm not hopeful or optimistic about any of that either. So let's go over to locals, see what we have here. We've got Grouchy Old Cat Ladies here says, now this is scary. I'm thinking the U.S. could be actively doing the same thing here. TASS News hasn't been blocked by Google. I like free speech. So over here, TASS.com, here's their English news website. I'm not familiar with this one, actually. The Russian news agency, Ukrainian Special Services plot. Okay, so saying that Google was blocking them. Here's the link. Of course, I take everything they publish with a grain of salt. They're saying NATO and their Secret Service are actively using false stations. Yeah, and this is what's so complicated about this issue. The Russians are saying one thing. The Ukrainians are saying another thing. Our government, our media are saying another thing. And we know our government, I don't know much about the Russians or the Ukrainians, but I do know this. Our government and our media are liars. They've lied to us many times over the last several years. And so anything that comes through from them, including the social media companies, Google's a liar, Twitter's a liar. They all put their thumbs on the scales, manipulate the results to try to condition us based on what they want to show us. And so it's really hard to believe any of it. But you just don't automatically disavow data because somebody tells you you have to disavow that data. I mean, if our lying government and our lying media people will come to us and say, oh, this is really bad information, you can't listen to that. It's like, huh? I kind of want to now, because I know the stuff that you've been shoving down our throats for the last 2 years has been bona fide garbage. So why wouldn't I just see maybe what the alternative has to say about any of this stuff? And because of that threat, because these people are so petrified of you thinking for yourself, well, what do? They just eliminate them from the conversation. You are now removed from the index. We don't show your results anymore, because if you saw it, You might think freely. You might have another interpretation of what's going on around us. And that's dangerous. They don't want that to happen at all. So shout out to Grouchy Old Cat Lady for that article. Thank you for sharing it. Heffalumps and Woozles is here. Says Emory University limits internet access for unboosted students. Are you kidding me? Oh my gosh. Well, why don't they just take away their textbooks too? What a joke. We see here the program is designed to encourage students to get a booster. That's what it's for. If you haven't gotten 3, you don't get internet access. So what do they want them to do? Come into class? Okay, I guess you come into the class or come into the library and you use the university computer and you spread your disgusting unboosted germs all over the place, according to this school. Honestly, these schools should be ashamed of themselves. It's political politicking at the expense of education. Do they have values? Do they have missions that they align with at all? When we have a problem at our business or let's say a challenge that we need to solve, we go back to our values. We say, what are our values? Safety, clarity, and hope. Is what we're doing in alignment with those values? Yes or no? If it's not, we don't do the thing anymore. Here, what is this in alignment with their values? I don't know what their values are. Are their values to make sure that every single person is up to speed on their vaccinations? Or is it to provide education to people and deliver a format, a platform for young students, young people to improve themselves? And is this necessary in order to do that? No, it's politicking. And so these people should be ashamed of themselves. They have totally lost sight of their values, and it's a shame. And it's happening all over the place. Everybody's bending at whatever angle they need to in order to, I guess, virtue signal that they're doing something useful and meaningful. Congratulations, Emory. Good job. Now, the people behind these policies are sitting there, patting themselves on the back, drinking their lattes with each other, telling themselves, we did a good thing. We're forcing these dumb idiots to go and do what we tell them to do. And that's going to be our legacy. Congratulations, people. Embarrassing. All right, so that's over from Locals. Another one from Grouchy Old Cat Lady says they're still investigating this non-story. Remember when this happened? This was several months ago. So the border was still a mess several months ago. They haven't been able to solve that in any way, shape, or form. And when they were creating the Haitian migrant camp down there in southern Texas, there was apparently a whipping incident. Remember this photograph that came out here? You saw that, right? The actual Border Patrol agents trying to create some order on the border because the feds can't do it. Here, you can see that there was a big outcry saying that this racist white Border Patrol agent was whipping the poor Haitian migrants who were just bringing food to their people. Saw that, right? And they're still investigating it, apparently. It wasn't a whipping. Okay, the guy had a, what's it called? A Laredo or something like that he was, using to hit the horse. And that's it. But they turned it into a giant saga. And so that poor Border Patrol agent is still under investigation. What are they So, yeah. All right. We had a couple posts over on Locals. 3 girlies posted this one. Let's see what this one. Tim Hawkins, things you don't say to your wife. So go check out his channel and watch that. Thank you for that. 3 girlies. Shout out to the 2 girlies. Grouchy Old Cat Lady says, wonder if any one source is tracking things like this around the country. Yeah, different types of abuse with prisoners. There are people that do keep tabs on this, and there are sort of non-profit organizations that will fight on behalf of the accused. This one's interesting. Okay. Woman, pregnancy in prison, also involving transgenders. Very complicated business. Too complicated for this morning. Viantica says, who wants me to point out the owners of Vanguard? Let's say Musk is some sort of a good guy. This response shows how little he could do. So interesting card over from the Wall Street Journal. Headline says, Elon Musk is no longer the largest shareholder. Funds held by Vanguard Group consolidated, and they took over. Elon has 9.1%. Vanguard reported owning 8.4%, but apparently they added more. So, yeah, the cards are reshuffling here. This is a big deal. And if you haven't watched the full TED Talk from Elon, he gave a TED Talk yesterday. It was outstanding. The interviewer was terrible. I was really disappointed by the questions he was asking. For about the first half, he was sort of asking dumb questions and sort of needling Elon a little bit, where it's just like, let the man talk and explain what his position is. But if you haven't watched it, I would encourage you to watch it, because Elon kind of takes the gloves off on a couple people. Number one, the SEC. He talks about how horrendous government regulatory agencies are, how much they stifle innovation, and how much they will literally strong arm people into doing things that they don't want to do. So in other words, Elon had to say, yeah, I did this stuff bad because of the leverage that the federal government has. The federal government almost took out Tesla. And all of the progress that they have made towards all of the solutions they have unfolded in many different areas, they almost took them out because of their, I don't know, irritation with Elon or whatever it is. Because it's a political, corrupt government that just funnels things to their people of interest. Elon is apparently not playing within the purview of their game. So they went after him big time. And he came out in that TED Talk and he said it. He said the San Francisco office, the SEC, they are bastards, I think is what he said. Yeah. And you go, wow, that's pretty provocative. And I don't disagree, right? And I don't deal with the SEC much, but I do know what the federal government, what the local, state, city governments can do to people. And they are destructive. They pat themselves on the back because, oh, we're, organizing society. No, you're not. You guys are largely impeding the growth of society. You just funnel money around and you listen at your stupid council meetings to people come in and tell you about water distribution reports. Oh, yeah. How much did it rain? Oh, and how is that data gathered? Wow. And so, okay. Is it draining properly? Yeah, it's all fine. It all goes, okay, well, that's great. So what do you need from us? Well, more money. All right, well, here you go. We'll talk about it. It's a joke. I've been to these city council meetings. It's a joke. So here, Elon is really shifting the entire, purview of the dialogue that's taking place around this. He came out on his TED Talk, blasted the SEC, which was just very enjoyable. And then he came out and blasted one of the original sort of co-founders of Tesla. And I forget the guy's name, Roger Eberhard, I think. And I looked him up a little bit. And Elon called him out by name and said it was the worst decision he ever made working with this guy because he tried to sort of take credit for Tesla and he didn't do anything as a result of his involvement. And so Elon was just on a tear yesterday. And I absolutely loved it. He also said that he's got a plan B. He thinks that, this is critical. It's integral into his sort of platforms that he's built. And I think he's not wrong about this. I think a social media application would fit very nicely with his portfolio of other companies. He's got transportation. He's got communication and intelligence with Starlink. He's got energy with solar. And so he needs communication. He needs a communication addition to his portfolio. Twitter's a pretty good one. And he can sync all those things together. And if he makes it a robust free speech platform that's cool again, that is, probably something that is kind of immutable is the language that I'm thinking he's sort of talking about, like an open ledger, kind of like a blockchain thing where everybody can see transparently what the algorithm is doing and make decisions on who to follow. And you can see where the levers are being pushed and pulled, what's promoted, what's being downvoted. And I think that would be just an amazing addition to his platform. And what he's been basically building is infrastructure that is separate and apart from the government. His own energy, his own transportation, his own communication, his own public square with Twitter. It's parallel systems, something that we've been talking about on YouTube for 2 years now, right? Creating separate structures that don't need the government. Elon, the SEC says, well, we're not happy with what you're doing. Elon says, I don't care. I've got my own, currency maybe on the back of Bitcoin or Ethereum. We've got our own satellite communication network. And cut me off of whatever you want. I don't care. I've got my own satellites up there. Don't need your oil. Don't need your regulations, right? And as the government continues to fail at everything they touch, and people have a choice, where are they going to go? Well, I know where I'm going to go. So I think that Elon is on the right track, and I'm very excited about what is coming. Now, this is shattering the entire old structure, and they're very unhappy about it. And so all of the people in positions of power are going to do everything they can to make sure that this does not go off the rails. And I think Elon's going to be under a heavy amount of pressure very soon. The same strategy that we saw with Rogan. They're going to bring out Me Too stuff. Who knows what's going to happen with his, comments on other topics that will be taken out of context to show what a racist monster, Me Too violator he is. There'll be, another round of assaults that continues on against Elon, and we'll follow it along and support him best we can. But, Mr. MVP's here over on Locals. Governor Abbott signing a border security memo. Let's take a quick look at this one. See if this does anything. Okay, so most of the time, these things are useless. But here, the state of Texas is entering in with the state of Nuevo Leon. And what are they going to be handling? 25% of vehicles are unsafe, slow border crossings. The states are going to work cooperatively to enhance border security measures. Signed off on by 2 governors, so they're just going to work together. Well, that's good. That's very nice. So there's cooperation, which is great. Oh, here's the TED Talk from, so here it is. So thank you. So Bonnie sent this one. I just referenced this, so it's over on our Locals if you want to go check that out. It's about an hour long. It's really good. Elon, let's see if we can get him to blast.
I'm open to ideas, though.
So they're talking about Twitter
right now, for example. So that's legitimate speech.
Too measurable, but I just think it's important to the it's important to the function of democracy. It's important to the function of the United States as a free country and many other countries, and to help freedom in the world more broadly than the U.S. And so
you see, he's trying to interrupt him. Will you just shut up and let him speak, for crying out loud? All right. So it's a good interview because Elon talks. I don't know who that interviewer is, but anyways, Heather's here says Secret Service records suggest White House wasn't truthful about the attacks from the White House dog. And I think did we cover this one yesterday? I think we may have just briefly touched on this. Yeah, so the Secret Service agents are saying, no, he's like a maniac dog, and he bit the hell out of everybody. And the White House was trying to downplay it like the Secret Service agents were at fault. And that's not appropriate. The Secret Service agents were saying, no, we didn't startle that dog. We were out there just being good Secret Service agents, and this dog kept biting everybody. So don't blame us for it, which was a funny response from the Secret Service. We had a couple other articles over from Locals. Let's see. This one is from Teresa. If you need Easter cuteness, which is Sunday, Easter Sunday, I'm live streaming my baby chicks and ducks tonight. Feel free to peek in on some Easter cuteness. Oh, great. All right, so let's check this out. So Thursday live stream from Teresa. And we've got some chickens. Baby chicks and ducks, not chickens. Those are cute. Those are pretty cute. I have a funny story actually about this. So I moved into this new place, and I have this what is it, a balcony type of a thing. And on the balcony, there are these little, I think they were for, when I moved in, they were for plants, like kind of like a metal cage that you put a plant in or something like that. And it's got some stuff on the bottom that kind of is decorative, and it kind of makes like this nice little nest. Well, when I moved in, there were 2 eggs in one of these little in this little bin that looks like a nest. It's not an actual nest, but it could be a beautiful nest. So there's 2 eggs in there, and this little dove was, nurturing these eggs, being a mother to the eggs, hatching the eggs. I don't know what the vernacular is, but was there. And I'm like, is this a zoo or what's going on here? And then we fast forward a couple weeks. There's 2 chicks up there that got hatched, and they're like big now. So there's a whole family of birds that are up there living on the balcony. And it's kind of a funny little experience. And I'm watching these little chicks hatch into these birds. And it's just a kind of an interesting thing. It's new for me. I'm a city boy. I don't know how any of this stuff works. And so we have here, this is from Teresa. So go check out her channel here, Base 10 Montessori. And this looks fun. Live stream of the chicks. They're cute. Ducks are cute, I got to say. Let's see what else we've got. Now they're eating, drinking. Okay, so that is cute. There's no question about that. All right, so go check that out over on YouTube, Base 10 Montessori, and follow Teresa and her chicks. Grouchy old cat lady's here. Trudeau with the meme. We've got Trudeau saying, I'll shut down your bank account. Zuckerberg, I'll shut down your social media. Fauci, I'll shut down your social life. Biden, I'll shut down your electric car. And who's this? Gates says, I'll shut down your farmlands. And then they join their power rings. All our powers combined. You've got Klaus Schwab says you will own nothing and you will be happy. So that's another good one. And I think it's true. I mean, I think they're all sort of working in cahoots the same direction. So great stories over on Locals. Let's check out some of the member comments on YouTube. We have Danielle DeFries making a comment on the J6 Fed video that I put out, saying the feds were all over Capitol Hill. And this one came from Thomas Caldwell. His case, of course, is pending in the DC circuits. And Caldwell's defense filed a motion saying we have at least identified 20 FBI and ATF agents. And there's probably a lot more than that. So they came out. I made a video on that entire motion. Danielle DeFries says, such a great point you made. The DHS and Secret Service don't even know who their employees are. Does the FBI? Could actual spies have been there posing as undercover FBI agents that day at the Capitol? That's what I'm asking. They don't even know who these people are. And they operated with impunity for 2 years. So could they have been there at the Capitol? Could they have been behind, any of the violence at the Capitol? I don't know. But apparently our own intelligence community doesn't know either. They just go, well, the Oath Keepers have a website at least. So they just blame them. But they had 2 non-agents that they were hanging out with for 2 years who were LARPing as actual agents. If I had asked that 20 years ago, I'd have been laughed off the earth, but today it's totally possible. It's a good comment there from Danielle DeFries. Yeah, and so I think that, there's probably a lot more there than we'll ever know. Deborah Yunker says, thanks for the informative breakdown. Bull Gator says, energy rules and the ruble is strong. Thanks, West. What fools. Making sort of a point that, all of the sanctions and all of the deterrent effects and everything that they said was going to solve this problem, not working out so well. Another one from K Bean said there were more than 20 glowies. We covered that one yesterday. And then Prometheus is saying there were 200 plus. And again, that would not surprise me at all. And there is more to that. I mean, there was more problems with them saying they were monitoring these groups well before January 6th. And how does that mesh with the idea that Donald Trump caused the insurrection through his speech? Either it was something that was spontaneous and just kind of came out of nowhere, or it was planned by seditious conspirators. So which is it? They're trying to have it both ways, and it's very, very tedious and frustrating. But those are great questions, great comments. Thank you for all the shares over from our friends at Locals. So those are the headlines for the Friday, my friends. I want to thank you for spending some time here with me today. We are going to continue to do these. I hope you find them useful and helpful. I'd love your feedback down in the comments below. I do read those. And so if you have any other thoughts on other stuff you'd like to see covered, let me know. Otherwise, I've got some other meetings to attend to today, and then we'll see what other stories percolate throughout the day, and then we'll see if we can make some videos on those later. But otherwise, I want to wish everybody a very happy Friday. Hopefully your week is wrapping up exactly as you desired, and I'll invite you to make it a great day, and I'll see you on the next one.